we're now going to move to our next panel, the future of the app economy. And let me introduce Jennifer Schenker, the chair of the panel. So Jennifer is the founder and editor-in-chief of The Innovator. It's a publication about digital transformation for senior executives. She is an award-winning journalist and has been covering the global tech industry from Europe for the Wall Street Journal Europe, Time Magazine, International Herald Tribune, Red Herring, and Business Week. She has been a World Economic Forum Tech Pioneer Judge for more than 20 years and has attended Davos every year since then. Jennifer, over to you, and I'll let you introduce Paolo and Ben.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the panel on the app economy. It's my pleasure to be here today with Ben from Google, representing Google and Google Play, and Paolo, who is representing Aptoid. The EU's Digital Markets Act includes a number of requirements for mobile app stores that aim to promote competition and fairness in the mobile app industry. In response to the DMA's requirements, Apple announced changes to its operating system and app store policies, allowing for the first time ever alternative app stores on Apple devices and changing its fee structure for developers. Google Play is also making some adjustments. In the next 40 minutes, we're going to speak about the current state of play, what the future of app stores looks like, and how AI might impact that future. So, Ben, let's start with you. What is your view on the DMA, and how do you think it will change the market?
Thanks, Jennifer, and thanks everybody for having me here. Great to be on. I think it's interesting from a Google point of view to just think about where we are starting from as a platform and as a business. I think Google has always sought to give developers flexibility over how they distribute their apps on Android. So it's always been true that in addition to Google Play, which is Google's owned and operated app store, Android has always allowed third-party app distribution channels such as third-party app stores like Aptoid, side loading, so users being able to download from the web or anywhere else they get their apps from, pre-installation, and progressive web apps alongside that, and has always done so for free. And as a result, the Android ecosystem is different from other platforms out there, right? That over 80% of Android devices today have at least one app that's been downloaded from outside of the Play Store, and over 2/3 of Android's phones have actually got at least one other app store alongside the Play Store. And so we're starting very much from a different position, and we embrace that openness. I think certainly if you have somebody from Android here, they would say that they see this as unlocking a next wave. And I think with DMA, what we're seeing is changes that give developers even greater choices. So around kind of four big areas, right? Which is kind of increased flexibility around the billing solutions that they use, increasing guarantees around being able to sideload efficiently, increased guarantees around treatment when using third-party app stores, and then the fourth piece, which is sort of loosely referred to as external offers, but allowing developers to show promotions inside their apps and games that actually drive people hyperlinks out to external websites where they can complete transactions. So I think all of that will continue to push a new level of openness in the app environment, and critically from a developer's perspective, I think, and I imagine we'll hear from Paolo, but I imagine from a third-party app store's perspective, critically, if you like, both halves of the mobile ecosystem opening up simultaneously, which I think really is the game changer here.
So, Paolo, let me turn to you now. What sort of opportunities does the DMA changes open up for alternative app stores like Aptoid? Now, of course, most people realize that the Apple iOS has been, a completely closed ecosystem. Google Play as mentioned by Ben, has been more open, but That said, the market is dominated by those two players, with only a few percentage of the market, or very few, little percentage of the market, share taken by new entrants. How do you think that might change, and why is that a good idea?
Hello, Jennifer. Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Just a quick introduction to Aptoide, because I think it's not as well known as Google and Apple, I guess. So we are an app store. We exist since 2009. We were established in 2009. So we run the app store business for 15 years. We operate Aptoide brand games lab in US. We have multiple partnerships. We have 100,000 developers with us, process 1 billion downloads a year, and around 5 million transactions, just to give a brief overview. A great question. So I guess Apple and Google have done a great job to establishing these huge mobile ecosystems, and we acknowledge that. So we are much better today than in 2008 when they were launched, and there is a huge credit for that. But also we know that over the years, Google and Apple protect their own app stores, which is a huge source of revenue, $190 billion a year in this market outside China, just Google and Apple alone. And that protection of the business, which we would do if we were Apple and Google, has some kind of impact. First, impact in the revenue of developers and in experience of users, because actually those kind of protection had avoided and blocked innovation in this field, in this industry. So in your question, DMA, digital market sector in Europe, but we must see that Japan is following very closely. UK, India, and other regions are trying to establish that we could have innovation in this field by having competition, the only way to have innovation. So I guess the Digital Markets Act is the introduction of a kind of leveling the play field, where innovation, better business conditions for developers, better experience for the users might happen in a flourished competition environment.
Okay, and just as a follow-up, what percentage of the market do players other than Google and Apple have today?
Great question. So between, as far as we know, and maybe Ben has other numbers, between independent app stores like Aptoide or One Store in South Korea, OEM stores like Xiaomi, Oppo, Vivo, Samsung gets around 3% to 5% in some geographies. In South Korea, for instance, goes up to 20%, but is an exception.
Okay, great, thank you. So Ben, Google Play is still in discussion with the EU on how it will adjust its approach to conform with the DMA. Can you tell us what it might look like?
Sure, thank you. Look, just to re-emphasize what Paolo said, right? There are markets around the world where we face pretty intense competition. I think, and again, Paolo, you'll correct me, but there are markets in Southeast Asia where we see third-party app stores getting 30-40% of the total spend on Android, and that's really, we know what the reason is. It's not an easy one to fix, which is around we're being outcompeted on forms of payment, on the forms of payment that are being offered. You see that less often in a market like the EEA, where most people will have a credit card or PayPal or something that's relatively easy to serve. But in markets where kind of cash to electronic value is a big part of that space, Google has been less rapid at recognizing that, and our market share suffers as a result. So I think there is competition out there. There are areas where it's easier, and markets where it's easier for them to compete. In terms of our discussions with the EU, look, all gatekeepers, that's the EC's term for ourselves and Apple and kind of handful of others, Meta and Amazon and others in particular services, had to submit our proposals for compliance with the DMA, which we've been in pretty extensive conversations with the EC about for over 2 years. And from an app store's perspective, as I mentioned, there were kind of 4 areas that we were required to update them on. The first was alternative billing, which actually Google launched on Play 2 years ago, which allowed flexibility, in fact, for developers in the EU or EEA, allowed flexibility to use a third-party billing solution of their own choosing, either on its own, on a standalone basis, or in combination alongside Google Play billing. And the fees, there was a reduction in our fees for that. So that was kind of part one. And we've been working with developers, testing and trialing that for over 2 years, and are actually at a point where we feel very confident in the solution that we've landed on there. The second piece, as I mentioned, was around side-loading apps, which again, Android and Play. Android has been very committed to allowing and making easier. Android 15 introduced both kind of reduced barriers, reduced friction in that flow, and also introduced tools that allowed automatic updates from side-loaded apps, which is kind of, from a developer and a user's point of view, has been a game changer there. So again, from a Play and Android perspective, that hasn't been an area of particular issue for us. Obviously, very different from where iOS and the App Store are coming from. And then thirdly, third-party app stores, which again, there was no authorization process on Android. They exist as I mentioned earlier, on a very, very broad range of devices. I think again, I'd love Paolo's thoughts on this. I think largely we haven't necessarily seen the same level of differentiation that I expect we will see now that the DMA is in place. And then the fourth area, which is really where our ongoing discussions with the EC are around, is external offers, is allowing developers from within their apps and within their games to begin to target users with specific offers that will be fulfilled and transacted off store. Now, the EC announced within 48 working hours of our submission and Apple's submission, and a number of the other players, but in the App Store space, that we're the two kind of relevant parties and the gatekeepers. They announced that they were investigating our solutions, and for us, called out wanting to have more detail and discussion with us around the compliance of our external offers proposal. And that's really been the focus of our time since they announced that investigation. And that's, we continue to work with them. We're very focused. Again, I think the stance of the different gatekeepers is revealed in terms of where they are in their current discussions with the EC. They've moved beyond that with Apple. They've now announced they are actually proposing to go to court and ultimately to fine them. We're still in a place where we're trying to work through which elements of our proposal need some changes. And for those who aren't familiar, what the external offers component of the DMA requires is that we facilitate those connections much more easily, that we do so only in a way where we're able to charge for either an initial acquisition fee, which is very separately broken out, and then to the extent that developers want to make use of those, an ongoing services fee. And kind of it is around both of those elements that we continue to engage with the EC to really understand and to share our perspective on what the law actually says and theirs, and therefore what compliance will look like. And obviously at the moment, those are confidential conversations, but we are working with developers across Europe on validating our thoughts on some of those and really properly understanding whether we've given the level of flexibility that developers want and need. For example, to be able to go and promote from within Play to have their app serviced and managed via Aptoid or via their own website or via another app store that may sit on the Android platform.
Thank you for going in depth on that question. I want to turn to Paolo now. As a new entrant, how do you feel about Google Play's response to the EU and also Apple's? I mean, it's no accident Apple's not here. They've made no secret of the fact that they're going to fight this. So what is your view on the response?
I have good stories for my grandchildren about Apple and Aptoide interactions in the last 3 months, but actually we were able to launch the first commercial app store for iPhone in Europe. So it was a great achievement for us, and we are thankful also to Apple, because it's not easy internally, of course, to open such a valuable market as this. And I will answer your question starting by saying that the opportunities for companies, for developers, for users, customers, enterprise customers is very big. So the market is, the mobile market is completely in disruption, because these ecosystems are will enable new ways of distribution of apps and games, of billing, of establishing direct connection with the users and with the consumers. So I invite everybody to look, to deep dive and to understand what's going on, because actually everybody in the industry agrees. It was a kind of a tipping point of the last 20 years. Having this in mind, we are being very positive, and we see the actions from Google and Apple very positive. So Google has proposed several things that make sense. Ben was saying external offers program. For me personally, not saying by Aptoide it makes sense, but let also tell you that the European Commission is doing a great job, because of course it's not easy to interact with these big tech companies that sometimes saying one thing, but actually when we see the implementation is something completely different, right? And I'm not blaming or judging, because we would do the same, but actually they're saying, okay, you can do this, but we look into the execution, and there are delightful things that I could mention as examples of the Apple enabled app stores, and even Google, and sometimes changes that actually creates so much friction, so much blockage to the users, that actually the business cases cannot be implemented. So I would say that there are solid and positive steps from both Google and Apple. I think Commission is doing their job, and they are doing well. I do think that we do have some kind of path to go through, because there are a lot of things, less in the models, because the models are, in my opinion, good, more in the implementation of those models. There where I think we see in the next months, we need to see changes, because actually the business cases, both in Apple ecosystem and Google ecosystem, will not change if those things are not tweaked and improved.
So at the end of this regulatory path, what do you think, a successful app store should look like? I'll ask you to follow up, Paulo, and then Ben.
Okay, sure. Innovation is something that we know it starts, know how it ends. I say that the market will find new use cases, engineering things to do with, could be artificial intelligence. We can use artificial intelligence to interact with the App Store and to recommend me apps. We are working internally in some internal projects to try to drive innovation on that. I do think that innovation comes with a budget for research. Otherwise, it's hard. And to have a budget for research, you need to have business. So opening the business for the Google ecosystem and Apple ecosystem will allow companies like Aptoide, but also many other companies. Epic is developing their own app store for iPhone, and vertical for industry app stores, cars, TVs, and so. And that kind of business will drive innovation, will drive research budgets. So I would say two things. First, better conditions for developers, for game developers, for app developers, streaming industry and others industry that are always being somehow blocked by the distribution channel can have innovation. And then for the users, the experience of having an app store in the end of this process could be improved by innovation.
So, Ben, do you want to add to that?
Sure. Look, I think I definitely think that the process of the DMA and the parallel processes that Paolo mentioned around the world are going to see changes. We've actually begun rolling out the alternative billing solution that was originally developed for the EC in multiple other markets. So we're in now almost 70 markets globally, including those that are in the EEA with that solution. Because again, what we've found is both for developers and consumers, choice around billing has actually increased the total volume of transactions for our partners, and we only grow if our partners' revenue and their business grows. I think The other thing I would completely endorse that Paolo said was, I think we will begin to see greater differentiation in terms of the types of stores that come to market. As Paolo mentioned, the kind of Epic Games store, I think we'll see similarly from Microsoft, who also own Activision Blizzard King. I think they'll be coming to market, and I think how consumers and developers will benefit from that, and indeed actually how the mobile platforms kind of interestingly will benefit from that is really differentiated propositions in terms of whether that's around exclusive content or apps and games that sit within some of those, or at least for windows or periods. I think we'll see a much more exciting market in terms of what different stores are able to, whether for their users, as in the industry verticals that Paolo has described, or for developers in terms of the services, that whether fuller services, deeper services, thinner services that are provided. I think we'll see much greater differentiation. I think from Play's point of view, we will continue to double down on the service that we try and deliver to our users, both consumers and developers, which from a developer's point of view, we kind of do three things for them, right? We help them with acquiring users, we help with driving engagement on their apps and games, and we help with making money from that engagement on our platform. And that's the only way we make money. We don't make any money, right? Meaningful revenue streams beyond that. And I think for us, that is all underpinned by a trust on both sides that we have spent many years building up, that allows, and that trust manifests in multiple ways, that the apps and games that are suggested to you make sense. They feel like apps and games that you might use. That the security framework is there, that means that the apps that you're downloading onto your phone are reliably safe. And that confidence is something that we and our developer partners kind of trade on. That's at the core, is that the user believes if they download an app from Play, I'm not saying that's unique to the existing stores. I think the other piece has been the developer-facing tools that we've built, whether that's around testing, whether that's around analytics, whether that's around both pre-launch and post-launch recommendations on developing your app. We do a huge amount in terms of supporting our developers to actually improve their apps. And then, of course, which again is not irreplaceable, but there's a kind of like seamless delivery infrastructure for managing updates. Kind of some apps update daily. Most apps are on a weekly update cycle. It's not like, oh, once you've downloaded it, we're good. The user's fine. They're our user. It's great. I can now make money from them. So actually having a system that allows that are all areas where we need to now be really clear on what our point of difference is versus the rest of the market. And to the EC's credit, we need to be really clear, because suddenly those things are broken out, right? There are these three chunks of fees, like the initial acquisition. Okay, a partner can decide, is that good value versus me going and buying an ad, whether that's an ad from Google or from anybody else, that could push somebody to a web store where I could just get them to download the app from my own website, from a web store, from Aptoid, or is Google Play the best value for that? Then you've got the billing component, where again, in some markets in EMEA, there's a huge opportunity to make savings on those rates if you're able to build your platform. And then the third piece, which is around ongoing services, where already Paolo has, if you like, one of the few people who has a kind of like a go-to-market around kind of like standalone management updates of your apps. But I expect we'll see many, many more people coming into that place. And that's what the EC has done, is forced us to break out the bundle of services that we had previously offered to partners, and we'll need to compete on each of those elements individually, potentially to a very, very different set, maybe like Aptoid, who may be competing with us on all of those spaces, but there will be people who are competing with both us and Aptoid on just one or two of those areas. And that will only be good news for consumers, and will only be great news for developers.
Well, thank you for elaborating on how Google Play plans to differentiate itself going forward. During your comments, you mentioned an important thing that I'd like to delve into a little bit more deeply, and that is getting the balance right between choice and trust. Now, one of the things that Apple, has always emphasized is that, it controls, who can get onto the App Store to make sure that, everything is verified, etc. So how does a new entrant like you, Paulo, like give people the reassurance that they need while also giving them a choice?
A great question. So I would start to say we are new to Apple, but we are in Android since 2009, and that gives us the time to develop internally tools, security tools, to ensure safety of our users. Safety, it's one of the most important variables for a mobile user, and we do give a lot of importance to that. I think that safety and safeness is, before of all, some kind of collaboration requirements that Google and Apple may take with other players in the ecosystem that did not exist in such a large scale today, right? So I do believe that good actors like Aptoide or others, One Store, Xiaomi, Oppo, Vivo, wherever, can collaborate just to be sure that the ecosystem is safe. Closing the ecosystem to be safe is like saying, okay, we have 5 billion users using mobile systems in the world connected, 3 billion in Android, 2 billion in iOS, and we'll just allow one app store just to be sure that it's safe. But this is the same that's saying that in the entire world, we just have 2 bookstores to ensure that people don't read things that are for terrorism or other things. So safeness is not enabled by restricting options and so on. So I think that safety is important, but it's not absolute value that justifies everything. And how can we achieve both things? With collaboration. I think there are a lot of strategies for collaborating. There are a lot of companies focusing security in the world, antivirus and so on. And there is the possibility of collaborating to establish that we can have choice and we have safety at the same time.
Okay, thank you. Ben, anything to add to that?
No, I think that's a really comprehensive. I think safety is actually central. I mean, that's one of the reasons I mentioned it is central. People, these devices, they feel incredibly personal, right? There's probably not a device that any of us own that feels more personal than our mobile phone, and protecting users' experiences on that and protecting them from potentially bad actors is central to an app store's being, and we invest dramatically in that, as I'm sure Aptoide do. But that will be an area, as we've seen, Apple have sought to put that front and center, which is now something that they've got to kind of unwind, or at least understand how are they going to communicate to their users that not kind of everybody is a bad wolf, right? I think that's unfortunately the corner they had historically painted themselves into.
So we've talked a lot about how the changes might affect developers and users, but now we have a growing number of corporates who want to become platform plays and are looking at the possibility of building their own app stores. How can Aptoide and Google Play help? Paulo, I'll start with you.
So I would say there are business cases that we can envision that benefit from having app distribution strategy, app store, and there are others that we cannot envision and will happen, because that's about innovation, right? When you have some regulation disruption or technology disruption, the business cases just appear. So I expect that there are well-known cases and there are others that are not so well-known but appear in the future. In Aptoide, we collaborate with different companies. I'm a member of US carriers, Verizon, AT&T, to kind of provide them a curated environment, game-centered environment for their users. So I think that's an interesting vertical, a curated app store for the US carriers users. I would think that there are others that will happen. Could be specific business apps, could be specific device apps. So at Aptoide, we do have the infrastructure to allow to set up a kind of an app store where our partner has the ability to kind of choose the apps to be there, so and have a curated content and can have statistics and so on. I think there are multiple collaboration aspects here. I think will emerge new business cases, and I think an app store can be developed internally, could be done through a collaboration like a company like Aptoide. So there are multiple ways. The important part is just to explore the business cases that can deliver value to those companies.
Okay, Ben?
Look, I think similarly, I think we will see a lot of experimentation, and I think as Google, not just as Google Play, I think Google has whether it's with Android and the Play Store, or whether if you think of other surfaces on television, we have Android TV and we have Google TV. Google TV is, if you like, the play of that environment. It's the branded, owned and operated kind of consumer-facing solution. Android TV is a solution that's built for mobile operators, for TV companies. So indeed, for anybody who chooses to, it's a platform that is eminently malleable and where you can create, the operator, corporate, in that scenario. The same thing in auto. You see in cars, you can get both the Google full solution, or there's Android Auto, both of which, by the way, again, I think this is the stuff this is where you will see innovation. Some of the apps on both on TV and on auto, you suddenly realize that actually the experience that you'd previously had on a mobile phone was so suboptimal. When you see Google Maps in car, you realize that was the screen, that was the form factor it was designed for. When you see some of the video apps, but even Spotify's app on auto or on television, when you see those apps, you realize, oh my goodness, how limiting the form factor of a mobile screen was, how unlocked these partners' creativity and the innovation has been. Same thing actually with wearables, where you're seeing the same, again, as Paolo said, what I think you will see is this kind of way. And from Google's point of view, I suspect we'll always try and have a direct to consumer play, but alongside that, in the same way we have Pixel alongside Samsung and others who are our partners in this marketplace, it's our business is hinged on the success of the overall ecosystem as Google. Even if that's less true, obviously for me as player, I'm competing like hell against them all. But my colleagues in Android are probably thrilled that Aptoide and Epic and Microsoft and everybody else is going to be bringing exciting new stores to the Android platform.
So now I want to go back to something that Paula briefly mentioned earlier in the conversation, and that is, how AI will impact app stores going forward. Already we are seeing AI assistants become available. Where do we go from here? Can you both do a little bit of crystal ball gazing and tell us what may be in store? Do you want to start, Paulo?
Ben, you start this time.
Perfect. I'll start. There you go. Take it. Yeah. Look, I think there's a number of things. Right? I start both from what will AI, and in particular what will Gen AI do, and there's a whole wealth of speakers who will talk kind of what the push from that direction is going to be. I think what I would also start with is, if you like, what the push from the side of apps and app stores is at the moment, which is each of us, we've probably got, if you look at the device that's in your hand or within reach, it's probably got 100 to 150 apps that you've installed on it, of which you probably make regular use of kind of 10 to 20 of those. We know both from a user's point of view and from obviously a developer's point of view and an app or game owner's point of view, an opportunity to surface more content from the apps and games that you've already chosen to download, some of them to pay for, some of them on a free basis, surfacing more of the content that's in them without you actually having to go and open the app. Understanding your need, understanding when and where that information might be useful to you is something that we're already working on. At the moment, just in relatively simple ways, how much of that can you surface on the -1 screen on Android? Are there pieces that kind of as your phone says it's the end of the day, or as you walk into your home, as you switch from roaming, from being on a mobile network to your home Wi-Fi, are there a different set of apps that should be surfacing their content to you to begin to allow you to plan what you're cooking for dinner, or what you're going to watch for the evening, or where you're going to watch England in the European finals? I couldn't resist getting that one in. But the other side is, you'll hear a lot of talk about AI assistance, right? Which is, if you like, the other end of it, which is how can an assistant better navigate the whole of the world's information? And I think we will see on the mobile device an opportunity for those two things to begin to merge, where I think there is if it's an app I've already downloaded, then there's kind of like an acceptable level of surfacing content from it. But if something's going off finding an app that I've never downloaded, if it's an app that I wouldn't necessarily have chosen to download, then I think there will be more of a challenge around that. And I think we're going to see that an exciting space where those two pressures are going to meet and mingle.
Okay. We are almost out of time. So Paulo, you kind of have the last word on, what you think the future of the App Store will look like.
I will throw just some things for the people in the audience to think over. For me, it would be pretty reasonable that Google would offer an App Store for iPhone. Why not? Google has other apps in iPhone, right? And Google has the contacts with developers. So strange things like having your App Store in iPhone being delivered by Google and managed by Google, something strange that can happen. Why not? Having Aptoide inside Google Play, it happened until 2014, is something that can happen. Why not? And in terms of artificial intelligence, I think it will deliver value in 4 ways to App Store. First, safety, we spoke about it, could enable even more safeness. Second, interfaces to interact with the App Store, new ways, speaking, assistant, you mentioned. Third, very important, discoverability. I don't think that app stores are still there in terms, sometimes I want to the App Store, I don't know really what I want. I want a game to kill time. I want an app that help me with recipes. And it's difficult to find it in Aptoide or Google Play, I'm not judging. So I think it will help us. And finally, for developers, user acquisition. User acquisition is very, very specific thing, but is a pain for developers today. The cost is rising, and I think artificial intelligence will help a lot developers that are able to manage that. So I would say that there are unleashed interesting things in the future, not only for these kind of regulation changes, but also by these technological innovation and disruption, which is AI.
Thank you, Paulo. And thank you too, Ben, for really giving us a very comprehensive overview of where we are today and where we're heading in the future on the app economy. And with that, I'm going to hand the floor back to Lure. Thank you both. And thank you to the audience watching.